Okay, so the recipe I'm making tonight calls for kale, mushroom, and goat cheese. And so to do the kale, of course, I chopped off all the ends already, peeled off the outer pieces of it, so we're left with this wonderful, delicious, so yummy midsection. I'm going to cut this into, not terribly thick rounds because, of course, they'll become separated while we're cooking. And then we're going to lightly saute these before we put the eggs in the pan. So I'm going to finish prepping these and I will be back. So I have cut up all my leeks. I've got my pan heating. I do use cast iron. Somebody asked. Yes, I do use cast iron. And yes, I will do a video about how to clean it, treat it, and keep it so it can be used for generations to come later. But for tonight, I'm going to put my leeks in the pan. We're going to get them cooking, stir them about, 4 or 5 minutes with some olive oil there in the heated pan, and then we'll move on to the mushrooms. Okay, so here's my stove cam. I let these sit a little bit too long while I was putzing with the camera to try and get the shot right. Sorry about that, but normally I would not let them sit for that long and get that brown. But in any case, they're going to be delicious anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So, like I said, you're going to stir the leeks about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, whatever. Again, I prefer my vegetables to be a little bit more on the crunchy side than the soggy side, so I tend to undercook, knowing that when I preheat, it's going to, bring it back up to normal texture. So I've pulled the leeks and I've switched over to the mushrooms. Now, for those of us that are Julie and Julia fans, you might recognize the don't crowd the mushrooms. Don't crowd the mushrooms. Mushrooms want to have space, they want to breathe, they want to soak up all the lovely butter that's in the pan. So don't crowd the mushrooms. Now we're just going to let these sit. They're going to release quite a lot of fluid, which is good because we don't want that in the frittata itself because that would make it runny when it comes out of the oven. And they're going to brown nicely. And when these are done, I will pull them, and then I will show you how to put the whole frittata together. Okay, so I've just about got my Cuisinart bowl full, and I wanted to show you guys, since I'm using packaged kale instead of fresh this time, what I'm doing. So as you can see, I've got all of these the major vein from the middle of the kale that I'm taking, and literally all I'm doing is grabbing the spine with this hand and pulling the leaves off, and then just separating them. Again, the main reason for doing that is because this major vein in the middle can be really, really bitter, and you probably don't want that in your food, unless you are a fan of bitter tasting herbs, and then you might want to leave 1 or 2 in there. I am not, so I'm just separating them out, and then we're going to put these over here in the bowl. And there we have it, some beautiful, beautiful pulverized kale to mix in with the eggs on this week's frittata. Nutritious, good for you. We didn't juice it. We didn't take out any of the fiber, which as a diabetic, fiber is one of the things that helps regulate blood sugar. So we didn't take out any of that. And we're still keeping all the vitamins and nutrients. So it's a really great way to include kale in your cooking. So I have the leeks are done, the mushrooms are done. I've chopped my tomatoes, and now I'm going to prepare the eggs. I use a dozen eggs for the week, cut into 8 pieces. So, it's a little over 1 egg a day or something like that. My oven is already preheating. I've got it set to 400. One of the important things about making frittata is that you want to start it on the stove top so that the bottom begins to cook nicely and the sides set, and then you put it in the oven, usually for about 15 minutes or so. I don't know, I don't usually cook by time, I cook by smell. I can smell when things are done. And so I just cook until it smells like it's done, but I think it's about 20 minutes. Okay, there we go. And now I usually add my seasoning to the eggs themselves rather than into the frittata once I've already put the vegetables and things in it. I find it you just get a much more complete mix that way. So we're going to have some salt. Remember, this is for 8 days, so I'm not eating all that salt in one day. Some pepper. I like to put a little bit of Tabasco in just to give it a little bit of flavor. Once that's all mixed up, you really can't taste it. I'm going to put a little bit of garlic in here. Just, you know, about a teaspoon, like that. And then, going back to kitchen gadgets, I like to mix this with a whisker, like an electronic whisker. So you get air and you get a much nicer, fluffier frittata at the end. So I have my little handheld immersion blender. It's a Bella. I don't know if that matters. And now we've got this lovely, we have some lovely bubbles. I don't know if you can see that. Has some lovely bubbles, so there's lots of air in there. It's going to make a very nice, fluffy frittata. So we're going to switch over to the stovetop can. So here's the frittata in the pan ready to go in the oven. We have the leeks, the mushrooms, the tomatoes, the kale, and then the feta cheese on top. I'm going to put this in the oven here in just another couple seconds because I want to give the sides enough time to set up. And then we will bake it for about 15 minutes, just until it's set. This is one of those dishes that you can poke to see if it's done, if you've got skewers or a knife or anything like that, because even if the top looks done, it could not be set in the middle. So you definitely want to check it before you take it out of the oven, just to make sure that you're not giving your family salmonella. So we're going to let this set for a few more minutes here on the stovetop to make sure it's set up nicely before we stick it in the oven, and then I'll show you the finished product once it's done. Here is the finished product. Doesn't that look delicious? This is my leek, mushroom, tomato, and feta cheese frittata with pulverized kale. I'll be portioning it out and I'll have breakfast for the week. Thanks for watching.